Hello, Americans, people of countries A through Z, various ways, locations, areas, and states. They are used remotely by a hyperforeign that is not countries A through Z. It propagated roles only allowed to be self cultivated with its human fact should be nature breaching method. Only allowed as all natures of bodies, individual, grouped, any grouped majority, any country's name, making the proper fact should be nature counters by its predicate acts method. For example, we have black people's rights of eyes, the predicate acts for facts rules. And for example, there are Russians, American, and Ukrainian people involved with Weathersfield police switching names with courts that have been switching names. They attached me to fake conversations with Weathersfield police when I was a kid and when I was an adult. There are many other countries at the same time that are shared on and off campuses. They have a whole bunch of things that are secret tied to that that are not even secret, while they're tactically delusions raw. For example, right through world wars with psychiatry, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, collusion slash S, concentrated, but per even worse than anything but with all location slash S. They have rules within a whole bunch of police forms at once, with all natures of crime scenes, all sides of criminal and civil cases. The law, names of the courts, people, the lawyers, their family members, people, the same thing with the courts, same thing with the police forms, same thing with interbranch, family members, neighbors, ties to that. Self-valuing predicate acts for facts put into databases and actual acting tied to that. There are a whole bunch of people recorded themselves. If they're pretending other different ways, but they'll show you that I was influenced. Like next to the schools I was at, people I don't know at all had other pretended for them. They don't even know the extent of it yet. These are people with next to the news locations. So when you hear people, this guy just said in this Fox News thing, obfuscated. He said obfuscated one more time. There's a Kelly Kaczmarek. It's against the law to lie about the CIA. And even if she made it up, it's a federal crime to lie about it. But even if she made it up, she's got roles recorded a whole bunch of ways, directly and indirectly, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members and neighbors. I've never seen a Kelly Kaczmarek in my life on a campus. I only know of her, how to pronounce her name, because of confessions and demonstrations to be by people that I don't know the names of at all, and other ones I do from other areas who sought me out, were influenced to just be around and say things to me since I was a kid. As roles with the police, who would pretend conversations with me at the police station when I was a kid and then as an adult. At the same time, with the news and the interbranch refusing to get on paper because they already stacked fake predicate acts with facts with all sides of criminal and civil cases, interstates too, and these with and as names that were in the World Trade Center and the spots next to it, including a court next to it, Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, New York, involved with the court itself and names on both sides of that case, involved with, other sequence shifts and people that use that in those names in their syntax, like with a detective Samuda, involved with some black-white female judges, with some KKK Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, and other intermilitary from Weathersfield, on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices, increasingly involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with a bunch of people from the Britain Superior Court and from Harvard courts, and with the Connecticut District Court, involved with predicate acts with facts methods at and next to judicial and corrections offices, and with motivation screening, even where and how apparent and real motivations, like with their jobs, that's their job. That's A through Z jobs. We weren't supposed to leave out where, why, and how. Our founders communicated they didn't have free speech. There was a breaching method entrenched that was measuring and maintaining what everybody communicated, including if that body was the majority of people, including if it was everyone of an entire colony. In other words, and the colonies were themselves the possessions of nations themselves, being haven't been used remotely since before, with the names of the science, names of the people and sciences, because from off those locations, from off those differences, their differences as our own are being used remotely. All syntactical counselors to the proper are sensed, including if it's a majority of people, including if it's everyone, including if it's any grouping of nations, as long as they are locations, areas, and states. Having blamed and valuing having been blamed, other things, others, ourselves, that the breaching method caused. Because nature itself shows us a human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that true always. Slavery was value as, where it was entrenched and how it was entrenched before America's founders were born. Northern colonies and southern colonies. James Madison's plan forced forced the Civil War. We have all truths used for lies. The nature of debate/debates contain quality/qualities, aspect/aspects, and nature as criminal insidiousness nature /hypercriminal insidiousness nature. I'm not a lawyer, thank God. Nature itself shows us. Not only do we have to need to be able to discern criminal insidiousness nature relative to criminal foreign influences and know how nature shows us relativity. We have black people's rights of eyes. Nature shows us this is relative to those breaching method laws that reassign what is communicated by black people's rights of eyes. And it reassigned nature's demonstrations of that. Effectively, too, blamed on other things, others, and ourselves, and rolls with it self-value. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if it was a majority of people, including if it has everyone. More people agree that there are rights that are way more important than who is in office. Many people agree that all nature debate, principles. These are principal truths. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time for the identity of value progression, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that we can discern relative to why and how there are other species bodies with two eyes that are not even our species body, and though they are individual species bodies of individuals with all group differences and generation and generation of what is appreciated as a special difference here, or it is forced from here, lethal Hadith, forced space nature transfer. This is more probably how the ancients described and taught about lethal Hadith, not as a belief, but as a scientific observation relative to Earth's a special difference. Here, we're not just humanity as consciousness. Next time a bug gets in your house, like a spider or something, instead of trying to get it out, take a paper towel or a napkin, or just any cloth, anything, and try to talk it onto there. And you can get it to walk on there. It's just going to be a little scared. No, but also, it's aware of your consciousness, even though it doesn't understand your words. Talk to it with nice, because it's gentle. No, but in other words, there's consciousness distinct between the species body, but also non-distinct and simultaneous, but also further hyper simultaneous. That which is not us nor them, but it is all things anyway. Many pray. This is not about God. This is about a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous nature, of hyper, you know, in other words, that which is has us shown. We are distinct from other species' bodies, but non-distinct from them, and simultaneously from them too. While further for that slash hyper simultaneous, because where it's complete identity, a complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that can be discerned. In other words, this is generating revelation. All exceptions, the exception nature that appears to be in demonstration of other, come with demonstrations of this. We are not having black pupils, whites of eyes is inseparable from how since before America's founders were born. Those who went and got George Washington to agree to use their plan, and we were directed to refer to them plural as James Madison singular, and his plan that our founders plural were using, that singular plan in person, who still didn't have free speech when he was a president. This was before George Washington was a president. George Washington and his old army was not capable of overcoming the internationally monitored conversations that had roles entrenched with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and slavery, and witch trials, even if they were made up. They are right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens House, and being used to measure and maintain, to sense where and how others has been communicated about how and why George Washington had to come to Wethersfield, Connecticut right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, and had to counter-extort to force the other third of America's founders. And that's with and as three natures of Native American founders still being forced, just like our presidents, but only because no one has spoken for James Madison's communications and or nor for George Washington. Honestly, no one will allow the honesty about James Madison and George Washington. How about how they both used his plan and the founders behind him, which there are proofs that they are Native Americans, not just because they're his president / chief in nature itself, demonstrating to us the human species body of individual bodies has and had a differences racketeering method worse than war crimes entrenched. That's another thing that is true always, what slavery was valued as. And then America's founders were born. They did not have free speech. Everyone had to hide their motivations, change their motivations, and blame on other things other than ourselves, where and how at the same time, which created the phenomenon where they were given. Everyone had their speech to an extent. They had to entertain it, collusion /s against every other name and against themselves, while pretending other or being sensed. That was the value of those crazy, crazy laws against every single body standing, every group difference. This breaching method consciously replaced what before criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought sciences from influence from off their locations. In other words, there had been not criminally foreign influence sciences have been led by that, how it is functional, how there is an identity, there is a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible as that identity of hyper simultaneous nature, as that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. That is not our species body, is not those species bodies, but its identity to the extent we can discern. It comes with its complete identity relationship to itself and only increasing value of that as means to discern its body. why and how all these things are projected by it. That which is showing us we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time because of it. All exceptions in exception nature come with demonstration / of the same thing. Oh, but the genetics do it. How come all the species bodies have it? You see what I'm saying? There's a further hyper simultaneous nature that is showing us you are distinct from the other species bodies, human body of individual bodies. All group differences generated by its system value here, especially, or it is forced from here. Earth's our own special difference, forced space nature transfer as a negative identity relationship to itself, where it is already equal, positive, like every identity is equal relativity to positive and negative. In other words, we are strong to an extent, we are weak to an extent. We are right here in space where it's about to be too hot, about to be too cold, even down to even the plant species. Everything is in demonstration of this distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. And the parts of itself that way manifest too. Ugh. English was revealed to be taught this way. Increasingly, before and after I had an algebra class when I was a sophomore in high school, there were intelligence families involved with that class who have been planting predicate acts from other areas and federal evidences crimes on all sides of my house. And where I lived at other locations, they did the same thing with the same ones involved. As ones involved with the World Trade Center attack too. And when I use names or when I don't, they'll use that difference too. They're lying about their motivations. They're refusing to identify themselves into branch. And with all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, their family members, their sources, and increasingly mayors and people tied to mayors and their family members. All natures of conjunctions to them. Times collusion / S. With the worst uses and roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. At grammar schools and middle schools and high schools. Involved with timed identity theft, fraud, slanders, cover-ups. Having been. And with the security of the schools. And with the medical, with the schools. And the natures of people with the databases. And with the connections inter and intra campuses of all ages and nature, including medical campuses and fire campuses. Research campuses are so many ways criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions are also relative to where and to how subject treatments could have stayed, being and having been demonstrated to us so many ways. Faking exceptions, pretending not to realize exceptions, exception nature. As criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments and collusions. As collusions, for example, too, against perspective itself. Because a breaching method is identity of relativity to positive and negative. Treatments that were and still are criminal insidious natures of collusions and hyper additional, even when real and just only apparent. Motivations, natures, needs, interests, motivations. When with people's instances of names, descriptions, or positive or negative. The difference. Again, we have the same color eyes, different color eyes. We have nature's identity showing us about difference. We have the hyper evidential, so to speak. So in other words, only reason I know how to pronounce Kelly Kaczmarek's name, former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, has and others with other countries and courts, increasingly people with New Britain Superior Court, have roles with Connecticut police departments and with retired Weathersfield police chiefs involved with the House since before they lived there. Houses before people lived there. Involved criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought with a whole bunch of different countries and the wire crime and mail crime methods of Weathersfield police. And with the courts refusing to identify themselves, refusing to follow mandated law, they have roles, time, collusions with Weathersfield, with proven child abusers, print leaders of kids years apart. There were time use / estimate roles and collusions with the sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase. People associated with such. It's through and as context where tactically juxtaposed distinct natures of organized crimes and roles with it while pretending other and fishing for means to get away with it and having gotten away with it, to hide how having gotten away with it. This is at modern countries A through Z too. And the difference of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and 3 branches of government and intelligence tied to them and anyone's campuses. The difference of it if they were homeschooled. They're in other words. This is also relative to how you guys left out the black people's ways, about how anyone could even be motivated to leave it out. So also there are delusions with the readings of American history. And so they could have, in other words. But we had the wrong outcomes in cases because on up the state of Connecticut corrections offices, not up the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices, and next to it are collusions with next to the founding location /S. Since before they were founding locations. Our founders had to leave slavery entrenched north and south. That's why they had to force a civil war to be. That's why they had to force us to get the Constitution unabridged. You don't leave that out from foreign policy treatments. You don't leave that out from why and how A through Z are a big mass of as a representation of the human body, of individual bodies. Doesn't even fit into the country's things. And the country's things can't afford the nuance of how nature communicates. And like with exceptions. And with sequence values. When we search the conviction natures of the names of the people of the sciences, like with their treatments by history, needed to be summarized in other sciences too now. Tactically, criminally foreign influenced, while tactically delusions wrought, wouldn't have to be. Mass identity theft, fraud, slander styles, black pupils. It is time. So forgiveness is so we keep the breaching method blamed. Doesn't mean it's not even debatable. No, forgiveness or guilt. Don't leave out the breaching method or your collusion slashes. How come we never brought the collusion? It's recorded that Sandy Hook campuses have collusion /S with a whole bunch of intelligence next to and I don't know the Casper family. I never had a word of conversation with the Casper family. These are people that have intelligence filming things to hide what came before that, to hide what was recorded then, actually value, and what's to come. These are people who had collusion /S with all sides of criminal and civil cases, originally and still, and the courts, and the police forms, and their sources, including all natures of politicians. Show them how to speak for the law. Speak for the names of the people of sciences have been used remotely, could be foreign influence. Forgiveness is because the breaching method, to discern it, we have to discern it through those collusions. Those are collusions where and how. It's not honestly when you guys try to prevent and have prevented how we have black people's rights of eyes, everyone, and we know that only fake integrity. Since we were little kids, we only know that only fake integrity spoke for the suburbs, let alone for the cities. Nature shows us to refer to it the way they refer to it: suburban, suburban/urban, and urban. And then we refer to the rest as exceptions, exception nature. Even the wild places are tactically denatured. This is not the context, / these are not the contexts that revealed the seeds. There are proofs that there are a whole bunch of seeds that were taken to extinction, just specifically to force everyone onto criminal insidious natures of the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, action nature more and more is if to ignore the breaching methods, roles causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And its roles with other people, force, trick, turn, persuade, to collusion / us with that, to ignore it. And not to realize it too. We'd be able to speak about this comedy, but people have delusions. They want to have debates about delusions regarding things that are big and like appear to be debatable, but the only reason they get away with the debate of them. Like, how did anyone ever have the integrity to speak for international commerce? They didn't. How did they have the integrity to speak for wars? While right through the countries that were fighting with each other, Russians, Americans, German, right through world wars, they had collusion with psychiatry, putting fake things in databases, or putting delusions in databases at the same time, collusion / S, and then all sides of criminal and civil cases. These are people involved with databases that aren't even doctors, tied to the ones who are doctors, ones with badges too. Criminally putting whole fake transcripts, forging other doctors' names, not because they would, in other words, because they need to hide how they had roles, using and having used self-value. All natures of investigations, investigators, their campuses, their family members, the people next to them, tied to them, where they went. Increasingly, the connected corrections officers. So, in other words, and they're the ones forcing this to be brought up because they won't identify themselves. That's the backstory. And it also made me realize there are a whole bunch of people, I don't know the names of at all, and there are ones that's how and why I recorded them. They hid things from my parents. There are people with a whole bunch of different countries, like involved with the O'Brien family, with multiple police departments, with a Colloa family and a DeMoro family, and their roles with the former Mayor Gold and his family and people tied to them, who are also on and off campuses, including medical and fire, involved with Russians and Ukraine, Korea, Italy, Italian people from Italy, involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, in more religious spots and sensibilities, as collusion / S, with interbranch, even black, white, female judges, collusions timed with child abusers, leaders of the kids, and the black Confederate flag theme, and ones involved with this, switching names, forging names, bringing in different departments and narratives for the same, not even arrest. Then they went and put a promise of peer-to-peer, for example. They all kinds of crazy things through the years. And I can't get a response since I was a kid. These are increasingly ones and their sources involved with the world, with their cousins, with the World Trade Center, and people tied to them with the World Trade Center, spots next to it, and the court next to it. And those were our ones involved with home break-ins through the years. Time use / that roles as one's time recorded roles with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and timed use/s of body dumping spots, and of such brought up at the same time, and confirmed things on Facebook. A whole bunch of people tied to it, Enzo Pienza, involved on off Tura Highway where it runs into Hangdog Lane, with people on off the state judicial branch offices, and spots next to it involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, and with various natures abuses of each age. In fact, Chief Nature sickly distinctly as collusion/s to have that things associated with that pretended not realized in the future now, and having been. A Perone family will tell you, I don't know them, they pretended other. And a whole bunch of people tied to them at Central Connecticut State University have a whole bunch of foreign and domestic families through time involved with them. And religious spots, people next to Box Connecticut News, also with the names Kerr and Mike Pandol, also with Joe DeMoro and Heather Hansen, recording capacity demonstrate from the corners along Route 175. Our roles with them with proven child abusers, leaders of kids. That was also preemptively confessed. But there are more of them that were recorded then and now involved. And I'm only saying that because in other words, they won't respond because they need to have faith to hide what they were planting evidences. There were other natures of organized crimes going on at the same time with the stuff they put the principal in jail for. They were forcing that and other things with him. There are people on Knott Street tied to a Spada family and a Mayano family, involved also with a Delaferra family, who have been putting predicate acts with facts in databases. But for other people involved, it has something to do with their roles with identity theft, fraud, slander at town lines and along roads and routes, tied to the roads. In other words, and these are the family members of probate court judges, which are sickly involved with predicate acts with facts roles on off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, with the ones involved with the World Trade Center attack and child abuses and elderly homes and veteran homes, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, worse than criminal incompetence. Same thing with the streets. That's why and how the veterans home look like those buildings in the background of rap videos, shock and awe. The suburbs were designed. The suburbs from America to Russia to Ukraine, they look almost exactly the same. Houses are still built that were designed for that torture, extortion, slavery method. Crazy laws and fears to even be having been heard speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations. In other words, they have summaries of American history. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot. They pretend it's about the time. It's not about the time. We have black people's whites of eyes. A breaching method was entrenched. Then our founders, plural, already Native Americans, but then they coupled with James Madison and his plan. And then they agreed. And they got people to help. Then they got George Washington too, to agree to help. And then they went and forced the rest of the third of Native Americans and colonists to have no choice but to defend themselves from the breaching method syntactically, which was against the law and threatening against those people who would try to do that. It was against the law to try to speak for nature. Black people, that's one of the things that nature shows us, and our founders communicated about why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. They communicated about how James Madison's plan forced to counter extortions, people forced to help get the Constitution unabridged. We were directed to get the Constitution unabridged. And why and how we have rights there, too numerous to list. we're directed to not leave out how the prisons, people with jobs, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought with the difference of the interbranch of the criminal foreign influence, overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, countries individually grouped together, share here and there. Oh, but we do these things to make you guys don't have a possession of your name. /S. Russians were here before America was. China was here before America was. Already, the human species body of individual bodies had all group differences and defenses of it, tactical ulterior than every single individual wants and needs. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was an entire country or a colony at the same time, and that was adapted to. Any grouping of countries from this has locations, areas, and states complete self-value, increasingly complete self-value, complete possession / hyper possession of the syntax nature, quality aspects of nature. This is what is manifest where and how you guys have replaced what James Madison's plan did to force the Civil War. And to counter that which was entrenched with slavery, northern states and southern states. You have other communicated for our founders. You have other communicated about the extortion of George Washington that he communicated. You have other communicated for why and how he had to come to counter-extort at Connecticut right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. You have things like courage pretended would cause it. If you had courage, you would not hide and plot. I rap a lot. Get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News, WFSB, please. Do what's right. Repent. And Fox Connecticut News, please. You have sources, the same ones involved with WFSB, and next to them are the same ones at your spot and next to them, which is right next to the state capitol. But it's all around it. The state capitol is increasingly involved with intelligence families from Weathersfield, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with a whole bunch of different countries and criminal enterprises at the same time with the interbranch switching and forging names. And names at next to body dumping spots. Perverse involved. That's why it's necessary to pick one who disbelieves, because you guys are confessing. You have people from Hartford Hospital refusing me to communicate with me because they already pretended fake conversations with me. One's named Leahy. As doctors, too, they're pretending people to fake conversations with doctors. They have judges and prosecutors from multiple courts personally and professionally involved with them, with multiple distinct natures of organized crimes and uses of the difference of that. Criminally foreign influence, summary use. These are people with all sides of my house, involved with the Leahy family, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, people with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, putting fake, having people film next to them, pretend they know them. That rolls untimely deaths. The only identities allowed to counter such things, not by accident. They have differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. You guys were looking deeper to your roles with the people next to the campuses. A whole bunch of people from other areas will confess, record, demonstrate, confirm. They have been planting evidences intercities at the colleges and universities I went with the people involved with the wire crimes and the falsified police reports when I was a kid and now I was an adult. Fake conversations that were into databases with me and the police. As a kid and adult, wasn't at all. And through the news to cover up their life progressions. They've been stacking predicate acts with facts with names at and next to each campus I went. And the ones key with this are the ones, too, involved with the World Trade. I was an observer in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. And names on both sides of that case. And in the court had a sequence shift. It was proven after the World Trade Center attack. In the court right next to it, right before the attack, they had presented to a panel of judges legal papers where they had changed it to make it look like they had been handed in late. But then it was proven that they had been handed in time. And that led to a part of a 2006 district court case. Instead of in Manhattan, that was in Connecticut in 2006 with former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson of the Racketeering Influence to Corrupt Organizations Act, Robert Luskin. His co-defendants and their family members are increasingly involved with people all along roads and routes, from founding locations too, like in Old Weathersfield, all along Route 175, and corners of it are people that act and have other people take pictures. So, and then they ask questions, pretend people don't remember things, etc. Increasingly, intelligence families tied to a Kevin Carone, a Mark Carone, and a Jamie Carone, and their educators have roles of predicate acts with them, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former domestic military, and people that in my area involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, proven leaders of kids, and more where they had forced roles with that. And these are the same ones with multiple police departments through time involved with this. So we have people jump in and speak on serious issues, and they use aggression to mimic seriousness, or they use calmness, to tactile terrier how it should be used. Aggression should be used to defend how Black people's rights of lives are inseparable from the subject of slavery, how that breaching method had those laws assigned and roles with it, and how they had been sustained, and nature's demonstrations of it had been sustained, and those demonstrations had been mixed, blamed on other things, others ourselves, not the breaching method, even though that was increasingly what was being demonstrated. In other words, all truths. In other words, we're on the same ancient trap. /S. If people want to debate that, that's if we put they can't do it honestly, and there'll be demonstrations of the same thing. But that's a general debate thing. Like, let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. So Connecticut court they have Connecticut's courts, on of the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and wire crime in the form also of wire crime acts and methods to pretend they have evidence of people knowing each other or having communicated other than how they did, and why, or also the fake motivations for it. Increasingly, neighbors of a Fazina family, Maria Fazina, and herself, and a Stephen Stocko, and people tied to a Stephen Stocko and his educators. They are and have been involved with people from Central Connecticut State University, involved with criminal. I never saw a Maria Fazina on a Weathersfield campus in my life. A Stephen Stocko was in a math class, I believe when I was a junior. And he had been, and that was like one of the exceptions where they had my neighbor, a Ray Colo, and a Paul Zano. And they had a Ray Colo and a Paul Zano harass him through the entire class. And they hid their roles with predicate acts with facts before that. Like when I was in 9th grade, I had a friend in another town, and I used to hang out there, and or whatever, I was to hang out with my friend. I didn't know anybody from my freshman class. And there were exceptions from people I don't even know the names of yet. I don't know if I'll ever know the name. Like people that went to private schools too, from other areas who came out in my area, like with the phenomenon of a pond that used to be there near my house. It's like all dried up dead now. It's like a brook, in other words. And there's a field though. Even when it was like that it's just a field. Someone was trying to time me. Robert Rodriguez, one of the ones who brought up the principal child abuser to me, and untimely death rolls. My other neighbors were also involved with people from Trinity College, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People from Weathersfield were involved with the untimely death, even if it was made up, with putting fake things, fake letter, and changing and faking digital evidences. These are also people with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with Joshua Stryker, who faked ties, lied about me when I was a kid behind my back. I never even saw him around campus. I walked by him one time. He made no words to me. And it was a day after someone made relative confession and demonstration. And I don't know that girl's name. She's a woman now. But they're involved with at Trinity College. They have roles with some untimely deaths and other natures of organized crime. With also a Dean Judge from Central Connecticut State University before the World Trade Center attack and after it. His family members and people associated with them are involved with a whole bunch of different countries. And they forced them to collusion/S with intelligence from Wethersfield, including foreign and domestic military. Ones I don't even know the names of. I don't even know the name of Ray Colol's neighbor from Newington, his reported roommate, as one of the people next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, and with different clubs at the same spot through different owners. I don't know what they're doing with the intelligence community with the Colol tomorrow. All intercities and people tied to them. Mark Violet and Justin Levinskis sought me out. I never seen them together, and they made confessions tied to my neighbors. They have roles with my neighbors named Colol and O'Brien, involved with all kinds of wire crime acts and all kinds of federal evidences crimes, criminally foreign influence with a whole bunch of different countries, people with Korea, and these people, and they're in other words, nothing against Koreans, just the ones with the psychiatry involved with the police, but they're speaking about crimes, the roles of predicate acts with facts. These are in other words, they're speaking about obfuscation. They won't even get on paper one name and sequence it to branch. Please, Fox News, follow mandated law. Get the WFSB. Get me off the fake conversations with you and with others about the World Trade Center attack. You also recorded all kinds of medical offenders with involved further next to the campuses with people planting predicate acts and identity thefts and frauds. A whole bunch of medical families and people with badges confessed and recorded. Also, people involved with criminal enterprises, people that say they're cousins of people Scalora, involved with more child offenders of kids and identity theft frauds, acting things so people could film illusions where they have collusion/S with all sides of criminal and civil cases and the crime scenes, and the news at the same time because they played it so long. These are people interstates, people with the Miami intelligence. They have and these are people with the corrections and judicial offices. There are proofs interstates, not just Connecticut, and the names next to it. In other words, there are proofs when they record things when people going by. They're influencing people to have conversations. They can't afford to have the actual quality of what they had recorded that they brought to courts before, including half the time there are proofs that people don't even see it. All natures of investigators, a whole bunch of different ways they were used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. That's one of the answers to why and how they left out black people's rights of eyes, even though it's inseparable from what slavery is about, because nature is showing us this. And then further, because our founders communicated this, their communications is distinct from what they said, because everyone's speech was measured and maintained an extent of collusion/S against everyone else and against themselves. And they had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise that body was sensed. Again, including that body was a majority of people, including was everyone, black pupils. It is time. So let's force mandated law, and it shows revelations. It shows us what to do. We're better than perfect. It leads. The rest proceeds. Leads of our deeds. Worse than that. Okay.